I'm Travis Brown, founder and CEO of Mojo Up Marketing and Media. And this is my podcast, where I talk to the most successful Black and brown business executives who've broken through the barriers of today's business culture. Welcome to Mojo Up Live, the diverse and talented podcast. I'm your host, Travis Brown, and today I got Bryan Kelley. He's a VP of Business Development for both ML Talent Strategies and TrueU. Welcome, my man.
Thanks, Travis, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, we've been chopping it up for a while, and I've got a chance to watch your journey and leadership and making things happen from a business development side. Why business development for you? Why did you land there?
I landed there because I wanted to help people. That was my journey when I first got my career started, was to help others. And it's been a navigation and gravitation towards doing just that. And business development for me is, do you have a problem? Do I have a solution? And how can I help? So that's my why.
And so in that business development role, because I think a lot of people think of it as like, hey, you're just going to sell stuff, right? Go sell, create some business or revenue, which you are. But it's the first time I've heard somebody say, but it's about really, helping people and solving problems. When you first started out, or when did you get to that threshold? You're like, hey, this is not about sales. Right. This is about people, and this is about solving problems.
Yeah, so my journey into this world started by accident. I was working for FFA, in charge of the trade show, doing logistics, exhibit booth placement, working with them on their decorator needs. And I saw an opportunity.
As Future Farmers of America?
Future Farmers of America.
Okay.
Which is another story we'll dive into a little bit here.
That's why I had to like FFA, because I didn't see that one. I didn't catch that one. All right, go ahead.
So I saw an opportunity to grow the show, both from a revenue standpoint, but also the impact it was having for the kids and for the exhibitors. And so I offered myself to lead a sales effort. At that time, I had no clue what sales meant from that aspect, but I knew that it was about building relationships with individuals. And from this standpoint, how could I help a company in the ag world find their future employees and future customers, which were the FFA students? So that was my first journey into, I can help them do something that they can't do themselves. Because of the unique audience that we had with FFA, there was nowhere else you're going to find 60,000 kids who were interested in agriculture as a career, or interested in agriculture as a commodity. So it was really interesting to learn, if I could help you, I can make money for the organization I work for and make a career out of it.
What's interesting about that FFA, so, I think this, but I spent 10 years on a speaking circuit, and a good handful of those were in youth. And FFA was always one of the stages I wanted to speak on that I never got to speak on. I mean, and I do youth now kind of really for fun and empowerment and joy. I still speak from time to time now. But that was one of those stages that you're like, as a youth speaker, you're like, man, you get in front of that audience, that crowd, those students, and they're so leadership focused, not necessarily just the stereotypical like farmer kid. Like, this is about leadership development. So interesting side story. But your journey now, so take me on the journey to get to kind of where you are, because we're going to unpack this culture thing that you're on now.
Yeah, so born in Terre Haute, Indiana, so a Haitian. Moved away when I was about 8 years old. Stepfather worked for Pillsbury, so he was in research and development. We moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota as a result of that. Spent those young years growing up in the very cold, wintry times of Minnesota, but developed a sense of who I was as a person. It wasn't until I was probably in the third grade when I realized I was Black. And because I was questioned about it. During track and field day in the third or fourth grade, one of my good friends asked me, he said, "Are you mulatto?" And I'm like, what is that? Right here I am, 10 years old. I don't know what mulatto is. And I said, what is that? And he shared with me what that was in his world, right? Because he was of mixed race. So he knew what it was. And I said, no, I'm Black. My mom and dad are both Black. But because of my light complexion, he assumed that I was. And so that was my first real experience of understanding or seeing that people saw me as white, Black, or something else, right? I had never thought about race at that point in time. So that really imprinted on me for years to come. Moving past high school, getting into college, was studying wildlife biology at Ball State University, playing football, and didn't have a passion for either of those two. So I had to realize, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go with my career, my life? But at 20 years old, I didn't know. So I moved back home, moved to Terre Haute. My first full-time job was working at Indiana State University, the Home and Civic Center, the house that Larry Bird built, and fell in love with doing events. And again, helping people was a part of that, right? You have an event coming in, helping them experience a great event that I was a part of helping. So that was my first journey into that helping mentality aspect of my career. Fast forward, there was an opportunity to promote inside of the university. I was passed over because I hadn't finished my degree yet. And my boss at the time, my mentor, very good friend of mine still to this day, said, if I hire you now, you may never leave Terre Haute. And at the time, 20 some years old, I was like, whatever, I'm too good to stay here, right? So I'm leaving. So I left, started my journey off in the Midwest, a couple different convention centers, met my wife in this journey from Indianapolis, moved back home to Indiana, no job, didn't know what I wanted to do. Luckily found a job working for mortgages, doing refinances during the VA refi boom in the 2001 timeframe. Didn't like it, didn't love it. Got a call to go back to the convention center world. So went back to the Indiana Convention Center for about 6 years. My kids were both very young, working 80-hour work weeks, didn't give me a time to spend with them. And so FFA called and said, hey, we got an opportunity over here to be the exhibit manager. Would you be interested? And that kind of spurred me into this new venture. Nonprofits for the next 15 years has been a part of my life. FFA, Project Lead the Way, the Indie Chamber, UNCF for 2 years, and then finally landing at Indiana Black Expo. All of those in progressive roles and responsibilities, opportunities to connect differently in the community with executives across many different industries, many different sectors, and really kind of help form who I wanted to be. Yeah. When I left Black Expo, it was a time for me to reflect on, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? The nonprofit world didn't have that same appeal to me any longer, and I knew I had a skill set that was transferable. So out of the blue, a good friend of mine, Azure Gray, called, who's the chief revenue officer for ML Talent Strategy, said, we have an opportunity that we thought you'd be a good fit for. Would you be interested? And so here I am.
And if we're going to dive into this role, and my only issue with Azure calling you is I didn't really think about you being, out there and available before I could have got to you, to join our team. Not saying, Azure and Mike, I'm planting seeds or nothing, but but anyway, so let me back up before we jump into this role of building culture now with people and go, all right, so what did you learn about yourself and about the Black community, about business when you're at the Indiana Black Expo?
So for me, it was about, how do I represent not only myself, but the brand of Black Expo? And at a time when we were coming out of the pandemic, we're coming into a time of transition for the organization, where Tanya was stepping down, the new leadership was coming on board. My role was to maintain some stability and to be present in the community. I felt that was my responsibility, whether it was on my job title, in my job description or not. That was part of my responsibility. As a Black man, one of the things I learned early that third grade experience for me was, if you're going to be a Black man, you got to be a strong Black man. And that doesn't mean that you have to be all powerful, you have to, being strong means being true to yourself. And so that was something I wanted to do early on, was identify who is Bryan Kelley? What does that mean to be Bryan Kelley? And going through the 20s, the 30s, those evolved. I had a time where I was called BK as my nickname. Also became a persona of mine.
I think Katie calls you BK.
Yeah. So, just how you identify with yourself is important, because that's what you portray to others. Yeah. So I understood at Black Expo, my role was to help stabilize, help rebuild, and kind of rebrand the organization.
An organization that we've talked a great deal in, that's trying to find their way at this point in time, and I know you're not there anymore, but how do you see Black Expo kind of being evolving in a place where there are so many other organizations that do so many things that they once maybe owned the market on, if you will, and now there's all these different other places rising up. So what is IBE's place now?
It's interesting. While I was there, I was able to study the history of the organization, and I think they need to look at going back in history a little bit. I'm not usually one to say that, but that's how they started. They started as a organization that was collaborating with others. And I think if they can find their space as the leader of those collaborations, they will find themselves in a good spot, honestly. I think because there's so many different small organizations, both for-profit and non-for-profit out there doing great work that used to be solely in the Black Expo space as an organization. Now they just need to figure out how do they partner with them and support them as the leader of other Black organizations.
And jumping into your new role, ML Talent Strategies and TrueU, Mojo Up has had an opportunity to work with ML Talent Strategies before, and also we're a member of TrueU's organization. So talk about what they are as an organization and why this culture thing is so important.
Yeah, so between the two companies, we do 4 things. Talent, HR, and culture strategies. So helping establish what does that strategic approach to your people, your culture look like. We also do HR, talent, and culture operations. So we can help run and manage your operations for your people. We also do the community culture with TrueU. So how do we help organizations define what their culture is and achieve it? We do the training. We work with thought partners, of which you all are one of, to focus on the 10 culture factors that we have instilled that these mean great culture. If you have all 10 of these things and you're locking it down, you have a great space. Most of our businesses, they do 8 or 9 of them really well and need help in one. So we help focus on that one.
When you think about culture now, and probably different when you're in the roles, and now that your job is to work for a company that just eats, breathes, nothing but, Amber does an amazing job, in her role, and of course Mike, but when you think about culture today, like, what is the essence of this culture movement?
It's a great question. I actually attended a workshop this morning. We were talking about culture, and we weren't part of the panel discussion, but it was just refreshing to kind of hear the other perspectives. It's all about how do your people work together, right? How do they come together to become one organism versus you having all these different silos and different personalities? How do you meld everyone to become a consistent organization that has a vision that is moving the organization in the right direction? I think if you can get all your people on board with what the mission, vision, values are, and they feel like they have a contributing component to that, and it's purposeful and meaningful, then you have a good culture.
What's interesting about that mission, vision, values, like, I think for so many people, it's like, all right, cool, I'll sit down, I'll write some of those and put them on a website, right? When we went through this process about maybe 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, it was like, hold on a second. And Josh Shelton, who was our COO at the time, he was challenging me to go like, this isn't just a value we're putting on a piece of paper. This is what we're saying as an organization that we believe at its core.
Yes.
Like, and at our core, like, and if it's in your core being that you believe this, you live, eat, and breathe this, and it manifests itself in all that you do, or it's not really a core value. It's just kind of a cute little word that you put on a sign someplace. And so we started to really unpack, and for us, it's we're people first organization. And so there's a bunch of definition that's around what that means and what it doesn't mean. And, being growth mindset and committed heart and accountability are 4. It's about literally unpacking each and every one of those and going, like, do we embody these? And for me, the challenge has been, okay, I believe that I do. So then the question is does our whole team believe that same thing, right? It can't just be Travis rhetoric. No. It's got to be inside and out. And when people see it, like, looking through the glass, it looks the same as it does on the inside.
Yeah, but you said one thing. It has to start with you, though. As the leader, the culture, the tone starts and stops with you. And so what you want to see happen has to be there first. And you have to live it. But I think then as you establish that as the company, you start to hire for those same characteristics, right? You're not going out there just looking for someone who has the skill set. but you're looking for someone that has the same mission, vision, value of themselves that aligns with the company. Because it's easier then to plug them in, to help them grow and develop, which then means your company is successful.
I know you guys are really focused on DE&I as a part of that culture. You know, how does building those core values and coming up with culture, you know, and DEI, this new conversation, this thing out here, right? How do those, where do those meet? How do those come together?
So DE&I is one of our 10 culture factors from a TrueU perspective, but we want to make sure that it is interwoven into the other 9 as well. Because if it's not, then it just stands off by itself. And you can do everything else to attract business and attract talent, rather, to retain your talent, to have a whole rewards program built up, and none of them touch on the diverse aspect of it, you're missing the point. So we want to make sure that when people start developing those strategies, that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility, all of those are intertwined into the process.
You know, we launched our campaign called Diverse and Talented, and the whole idea was that we wanted to focus that you can be both, right? It's not an or mission statement. It's an and. But a lot of people don't see it that way or believe that way. You know, when you on the ML side of things, you're talking about talent strategies, talent, you know, development or acquisition. Like, talk to me a little bit about how do you go find talent in today's environment, or how do you develop it, or what is the talent side of this thing?
So we're in this transformational stage, I think, right now from a talent standpoint. And when I say that, boomers are retiring at a very fast rate, and we're not replacing them with a one-to-one millennial or Gen Z. Can't even put us Gen X's in there because we're getting close to that retirement age ourselves. So the one-to-one relationship is not going to be there, and you're not going to get that skill that the boomers are retiring with. So you have to have the mentality as a business owner and business leader that we have to develop this talent, right? And so if you're going to be developing it, how do we help instill diversity as part of this conversation? You know, where are we looking to find diverse talent? Are we going back to the same pipeline, trying to find diverse talent? We know it's not there. Right. And we can easily say, well, we can't find anybody. Look, there's no one there. Mm-hmm. Where are you looking? Mm-hmm. How are you looking? How are you looking to attract them? And when they come in for interviews, what do they see? Do they see that this is a diverse work environment that they want to be a part of? Or do they see something that's going to make them feel very uncomfortable? So I think you have to be intentional about where you're looking, and then when you bring them in for conversation, being mindful of their background, their experiences, and what those tangibles bring to your organization and how it's going to help you grow.
Yeah, obviously you've been on this journey and you've had some great tenures at companies and learned a lot. Let me ask you this: what was the failure moment? You know, where you're like, this didn't go like planned. This is not part of my path. And you find yourself at a spot you're like, how do I deal with this?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I think, you know, failures are very personal, very raw emotions. I'm a person that's very competitive, played sports, don't like to fail. But I realize it's part of the journey. For me, not being as successful as I wanted to be. It wasn't necessarily where my employer saw me being or where, you know, others saw me, but where I was at. And that really translates into, did I accomplish what I wanted to do while I was here? Regardless of how long I was there, did I accomplish what I wanted to? And I think, and I look back at my career where I've had success and where I may not have had success, but did I achieve what I wanted to achieve out of that tenure there? And so life is a learning experience. And so good, bad, or the other, if you can learn from what you've gone through and make the right corrections or duplications if it was very successful, that's more important to me. You know, none of us are ever 100% successful at everything that we do. So knowing that I have failed, knowing where my shortcomings were in that failure and working to improve them, it has to be that way for me.
And so talk a little bit about your family and how you teach that lesson to your kids.
So both of my kids, my daughter's a sophomore in college studying psychology pre-med, and my son is a freshman in high school. Both of them played sports very competitively, and so failure was part of that conversation because they didn't win every single game. Their teams sometimes would not perform well, them included, in that conversation. And so just walking them through and how to navigate that this journey you're going through, you're going to have ups and downs. And if you learn from both of those equally, you'll be much more successful. And I look at my daughter now, when she was going to be thinking about playing college soccer and being recruited and everything during the pandemic, it was a journey that she didn't feel like she wanted to go on anymore. She wanted to focus on what her next goals were in life, which was becoming a doctor. And soccer didn't play into that equation any longer. She realized that had she decided to play, it would have been a much more difficult journey to balance soccer and pre-med level classes. I look at her now and I'm like, at the age of 17 when she made that decision, most kids can't make that. And I think, my wife and myself helped her kind of get to that point. My son, another example of that conversation, decided at the age of 12 he didn't want to play travel soccer anymore. He was playing national level travel soccer, wanted to be able to, one, have a normal teenage life, not traveling all the time, and not be locked into just playing soccer. He wanted to play other sports. He made that decision because he realized he was losing on some things, which was the engagement with friends that he had and opportunities to do other things. And so for him, he made that decision at the age of 12 and said, I want to focus on other things than just soccer. And that was, for me as a parent, as a dad, tough for me to hear him say that because I knew he was very good at soccer, but it made me very proud, the fact that he made the decision on his own of what he wanted to do.
I think we're all trying to figure out how to empower our kids to be able to do that. But it's interesting, like, kids are having to make these decisions, way earlier. And it's not like, hey, I'm just going to play 3 sports and I'm going to play basketball in basketball season, baseball in baseball season, football in football season. Like it's a
training aspect of it. There's the politics behind if you don't show up for it's something that we didn't have to experience. Yeah. Now, we went out back and played basketball, or went out and played football, and then we showed up for the club or for our team sports in the school. Now it's so much more competitive, and you have to be developed. You have to have certain skill sets to be able to be considered a good player, not even an elite player, just a good player. You have to go through so much.
Yeah, we've even found ourselves going, we're trying to figure out, like, what is even the right process? Like, where's the right program? When do you start a kid? My first grade son basically plays dang near year-round basketball at this point, and you're like, he's 7, but as a parent, you're like, you want them to find something they love to do. You're like, hey, is this your thing? How did you help your kids and be a dad that provides guidance and value to them, but not be the dad that's trying to make all the decisions?
I think part of it was my role as an early coach. My job there was to help them be the leaders on their team, make decisions for their team through their leadership that then transpired as they got older and as they started making decisions both on the field or on the court. They had some understanding of what that would look like. But to help them kind of navigate when, where, how, why, I really left that to them and was always there to have that conversation. I've always been very open and honest with the kids that you can do whatever you want to do, academically, athletically, socially. The sky's the limit. You have to make the decision on where your values lie. And I think my son in particular, being a teenage boy, he's had a little more challenge in that because he's getting pulled in many different directions. He chose to go to Brebeuf versus going to Carmel High School. All his friends went to Carmel. He was being pressured to go to Carmel. Great athlete, probably could have played all 3 sports, but the mentality of Carmel is we want you to be a specialist in one sport. And he didn't see that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted an opportunity to excel where he felt that he wanted to be. And that's where Brebeuf embraced him. And so it was, just helping kind of navigate and work through those things in their own heads to the point where they had enough information to make a decision and supporting them behind it.
You have a very, what appears to be like mild, laid back, kind of easygoing demeanor, right? Is that your leadership style? Or, is that how people describe your leadership style?
Yeah, I didn't think of myself as a leader because I was always the quiet one. It wasn't until I was recognized as being a leader of a mentor group that I was part of in high school when they nominated me as the leader of the group. And so I looked back at that time and saw that my style was to lead by example. I was never the rah-rah, let's go do this, let's get hype. It was more of, I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna show you how I do it, and if you want to follow, great. If you don't follow, what happens. Yeah.
And do you think, like obviously in your journey, we're very similar in age, that, you've been at many tables in this corporate arena, first only sitting at that table, have you got to that point where you feel like, yep, I'm comfortable, like I've always been comfortable, or there's a spot where I just got comfortable, like being me?
Yeah, I was not comfortable early on. I will say that for sure. It probably wasn't until working for FFA, we started doing more introspective work, how to have crucial conversations, how to have some conflict resolution style understanding. My style of dealing with conflict is to collaborate. I want to make sure that I get what I need and you get what you need before we walk away from this table. I don't want to compete against you. I'm sure not going to concede just openly and say, hey, you got what you want, we're good, let's move on. I'm not going to avoid the conversation. I want to make sure we collaborate. And so when I started going through those exercises, understanding the Myers-Briggs assessment of who I was as an introvert and how far, I was like off the chart introvert, but knowing that that wasn't going to be successful for my career, I have to become an introverted extrovert, which takes a lot out of me. Like after this is over with right now, I'm probably going to take a little nap in the car because I know I need that for myself. So when I started understanding who I was more as a person, it allowed me to win at the table, to step in and say, okay, this is not right. Something's not working here, or at least be able to pull the person to the side and have those kind of conversations. So it was late in my life, but it's really helped me. I use it to this day when I was just brought into a new board, and they were going through some things that just I had some angst about, and I asked some questions that I probably wouldn't have asked a couple of years back. So being able to feel comfortable to say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna step in, I'm gonna lead from my vantage point, is powerful.
Well, if you think it was hard before, it just got hot. This is now the Mojo Up hot seat. All right, I got some questions to ask you. One word or one phrase to answer. If you need to elaborate on something, you feel free. But all right, here we go. Favorite place to vacation?
Dominican Republic.
Coolest city you've been to?
My favorite city to visit would be San Diego.
Favorite homemade meal?
My mom's beef stroganoff.
A restaurant you like to frequent?
Eddie Merlot's.
Brand that you love to support?
Ooh, that's a good one. I will say Rebuff.
Favorite sports team?
Minnesota Vikings.
Ooh, didn't see that one coming. Don't think I knew that one.
Yeah.
Favorite college?
North Carolina, although their basketball team is killing me right now.
Last TV show you binged?
It's a show called Gotham.
I've only seen that. I've seen the little preview on that.
Yeah.
A must-watch movie.
I'm not big into movies, but one of the shows that when I find myself just wanting to reconnect with myself is Know Your Roots. Dr. Gates. That really has led me down a whole journey of understanding my family tree. I've gone back and I've found ancestors that I never knew about coming out of slavery. It's been a very powerful journey. So I highly encourage
What was it called?
Knowing Your Roots.
Knowing Your Roots.
Yeah.
Great book you'd recommend?
One Thing. The One Thing.
Yeah, I gotta sit on. I gotta sit over there. I love that book. Favorite type of music?
R&B.
Your hype song?
Tupac. Hearts of Men.
he went back on them. Nonprofit you love to support?
That's a tough one. I don't have one. I have more of an area of service. Any nonprofit that is working to help families and children, I'm there.
Heart's in that one, huh?
Heart's in that one for sure.
As we conclude, the final question is, there's going to come a time when it's all over and you got a number that started and a dash, a number that it ended on your tombstone, and there's going to be a bunch of people talking about Bryan Kelley. What do you hope that they ultimately will say about you?
That he was humble, faithful, and about family. Yep.
Well, we're getting to know each other, and I think that what I do know of you is definitely humble, family and faith, and man, it's been great getting to know you, and I appreciate you coming on the show today. You got to You get to finish. Yep, you get to finish it out with it's a wrap.
Anything I gotta say special?
No.
All right, it's a wrap.